The 1970s were defined by an increasing political awareness, technological innovations, and big changes in fashion, music, and attitudes. In music, we saw a huge development in the genres of funk and rock, and we saw the creation of disco and punk. In this episode, we'll learn about some amazing women venturing into these male-dominated territories. We also see the drum kit continue to evolve to accommodate heavier hitting styles, and we see the invention of the first electronic drums. My name is Vicky O'Neon. I'm a drummer and educator. More of this coming up next.
Vicky O'Neon presents
Drumming Through the Decades. Blew up as a genre in 1971 with music legends like David Bowie, Carole King, Pink Floyd, The Rolling Stones, and Joan Jett. This year became known as rock's golden year, and we saw the release of more iconic albums than any year before, or since for that matter. Hard rock was one of the most prominent subgenres of rock music during the first half of the decade. British acts such as Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, and Black Sabbath were at the height of their international fame. Also, in contrast, soft rock became really popular throughout the 1970s with artists like Joni Mitchell, The Eagles, and Fleetwood Mac, whose album Rumours became one of the best-selling albums of all time. Soft rock often used acoustic instruments and placed emphasis on melody and harmonies. We can also add glam rock and progressive rock, and the list goes on. So it gets harder and harder to define what a rock beat is. It could sound something like this. Or something like this.
On the dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, warm smell of colitas.
Or something like this. Or even something like this. We saw an uprise of the feminist movement. Whilst women were fighting for their rights, the rock scene continued to be male-dominated, and the general opinion was still that men do it better. There were a few pioneers in the 70s, though, who attempted to change this trend. Were the first all-female rock band who received a full album deal under a major record label. They had commercial success, including 2 top 40 hits on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. They also worked as session musicians for artists like Barbra Streisand. Later, groups like the Runaways and popular 80s groups the Go-Go's and the Bangles credit Fanny as an influence. Alice de Burr was the drummer in the band, and she says that she doesn't think attitudes towards drummers of her gender has changed much over the years. For the past decade, Alice has kept the Fanny name alive via the Fanny Rocks website. Bertha was another all-female rock band who were ahead of their time. They formed in Los Angeles, and Olivia Liver Favela was the drummer and singer. Each of the band members contributed with lead vocals and harmonies, and most of the band's songs were composed by members of the group. They signed a record deal with Dunhill Records in 1972 and released their debut self-titled album later that year. Bertha toured for more than 250 days a year, performing with acts like Fleetwood Mac, Alice Cooper, and B.B. King. Liver's drumming is compared to Thor wielding his hammer, and female newsletter called her, without a doubt, the wildest singing drummer of all time. Despite critical praise, Bertha never quite made it, and some critics say that the success never came because men didn't want to hear rock chicks singing about freedom and sexuality. Josie and the Pussycats was a comic book for teenagers about a fictional all-girl rock band. The series was adapted into a Saturday morning cartoon by Hanna-Barbera in 1970 and made into a feature movie in 2001. The Runaways were the first teenage all-girl hard rock band to record and achieve international success. They are considered to be the pioneers of girl power. The Runaways released their debut album in 1976 with Mercury Records. When the album came out in the US, some male critics dismissed the band. However, outside of the US, they were superstars with #1 hits and sold-out shows, especially in Japan. Sandy West was the drummer and one of the founding members, together with Joan Jett. We all know Joan Jett from her solo career with hit songs like I Love Rock and Roll. Time magazine described Sandy as the greatest female drummer in the history of rock and roll. After the Runaways, she formed the Sandy West Band and released a solo album, The Beat Is Back. To this day, Sandy continues to inspire female musicians, and bands like L7, Shona Knife, and Bikini Kill have credited West and the Runaways for paving the way for their success. The feature film, The Runaways, came out in 2010, and the lead singer, Cherie Currie, has also written her autobiography called Neon Angel. Funk started in the mid-1960s and had its peak in the 1970s. Funk music is a style of dance music that evolved from the black R&B, soul, and jazz scenes. It's characterized by catchy drum grooves, yes, danceable beats, funky syncopated bass lines, outrageous costumes and personalities, and often socially conscious lyrics.
Get up on that thing and twist the you better. Get up on that thing and twist. Say it now.
We can't talk about funk without mentioning James Brown. Although there's many different funk grooves, I guess you could say that he coined the funk beat with a strong emphasis on beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1. Another typical characteristics is ghost notes, which are these quiet notes that you put in between that gives this really nice groove. And we're also putting some of the backbeats on the offbeat instead. And all of this is nice ingredients for funk. And with funk, we just want to keep this groove, we want to keep it going, and that's what makes it so funky. All of these ingredients you can find in Cold Sweat by James Brown. So with funk, we see artists like James Brown, Kool and the Gang, and Parliament and Funkadelic dominating the music charts. So funk, just like rock, was also a very male-dominated genre, with some exceptions. Chaka Khan is considered the queen of funk, and not only is she an incredible singer, songwriter, actor, and activist, she's also an amazing drummer. At age 11, she was in her first band, the Crystalettes, and as a young teenager, she joined the Black Panther Party and became deeply involved in working with unprivileged youth in Chicago. She dropped out of school, joined Rufus, and embarked on an incredible career that continues to this day. Rufus and Chaka Khan produced 6 gold and platinum records, and that was just the start for Chaka. In the middle of the 70s, many funk artists, just like Chaka, added some elements of disco to their funk albums, which we hear in her massive hit, I'm Every Woman. This was when disco was at its peak and the funk artists saw an even greater mass appeal. If ever a musical style was to define a decade, disco was the definition of the 1970s. Although its popularity was relatively short-lived, it made a long-lasting impact and people are still listening and dancing to this music today. Disco also had a large influence on the fashions of the decade. Disco music itself evolved from different subcultures with origins from Philadelphia's R&B scene, as well as private dance parties thrown in the underground gay communities of New York. By the mid-70s, Gloria Gaynor and Donna Summer were topping the charts with disco hits like I Will Survive and Love to Love You, Baby. Disco Action Top 30 chart started in 1976 and was the first chart by Billboard magazine to document the popularity of dance music. Europe got its own version of disco evolving called Euro Disco. So what are the characteristics of a disco groove? Let's head over to my studio and find out. 4 on the floor is definitely an important characteristic when it comes to disco music, and it basically means that you're playing the bass drum on all of the beats. We've already seen this in earlier styles like early jazz and rhythm and blues, and it's just something about this feel that makes people want to dance. Later on, we also hear it in house music and in most of the pop music from the 2000s. And other important characteristics for disco is also an open offbeat hi-hat. 1 and 2 and 2 and 4 and sometimes you also play that with 16th notes on the hi-hat. And then we have the backbeat on beat 2 and 4. So all together it sounds something like this. I'm now gonna play along to I'm Every Woman by Chaka Khan.
Right now, everyone from A to Z.
The release of the film Saturday Night Fever in 1977 and its soundtrack featuring the Bee Gees truly cemented the massive popularity of disco. Unfortunately, it did not take long for a big part of the public to turn against disco, condemning it for being too mechanical and commercial. Anti-disco sentiment was mostly driven by white male fans who felt threatened by the music that was initially popular amongst LGBTQ+ communities and people of color. When disco fell from grace, it fell fast, and many radio stations held public events dedicated to getting rid of disco music with symbolic album burnings. It wasn't uncommon to see people sporting "Disco Sucks" t-shirts.
Anarchy for the UK is coming sometime.
Punk rock is loud, and the songs are often short with simple arrangements and relatively few chords. The lyrics express punk ideologies, anti-establishment views, and do-it-yourself ethics. New York City was the first scene to claim the punk label with big influences from artists like Patti Smith. Soon after, a punk scene developed in London. In early punk, members were almost all from a lower economic class and had become tired of the affluence that was associated with rock music at the time. Punks would publish their own music or sign to a small independent label in hope to combat a money-hungry music industry. The anarchic, countercultural mindset of the punk scene encouraged women to participate, making significant contributions. Artists like Suzi Quatro, Susie Sue, Nina Hagen, and Exene Cervenka are considered to be major influencers in early punk culture, refusing to be sexualized by the media. Punk opened the space for women who were treated like outsiders in a male-dominated industry. Many of these women fought against public sexual harassment and encouraged body-positive attitudes through their music, which continues to influence future generations. Other important women in the punk scene were Polystyrene, Poison Ivy, Lydia Lunch, and Gay Black. Let's head over to my studio for some punk. So as we said, punk music is loud, so we want to have an open hi-hat counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We also want to have the bass drum on beat 1 and 3, and we want to have the snare drum on beats 2 and 4. So all together, it sounds something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And sometimes we also want to have a double kick, and the snare drum is also sometimes playing on all of the 4 notes. Nina Hagen, are you ready? Let's play some punk rock.
Mund ab für den Staub, Katzen haben scharfe Krallen. Ich wasche nicht deine Käsesocken, Hosen, T-Shirts. Pack mich nicht an, verzicht auf deine Brocken, Lachen, Monotoken. Yeah. I'm looking for something to do.
Palm Olive was the drummer and founder of the all-female punk band The Slits, together with Viv Albertine and Ari Up. Originally from Spain, she moved to London at 18 and took part in the early London punk scene. The Slits played gigs with The Clash, the Sex Pistols, and were described as dangerous when they became notorious for their fights on stage and for provoking their audience. After The Slits, Palm Olive joined another all-female punk band, The Raincoats, who continued to have fans like Kurt Cobain, Courtney Love, and Sonic Youth. Olivia Records was the first female-owned record label that was founded in 1973 by a group of women to promote music made by women. Numerous female drummers found work and were able to establish reputations as top session musicians. Olivia produced over 40 records and sold over 1 million albums. They helped many female identifying musicians to gain a foothold in the music industry. Rosetta Records was founded in 1979 by Rosetta Rates. She searched for and produced albums of the early women of jazz and blues to ensure that royalties were paid to the artists. She illustrated the albums with photos of the women and wrote about the historical context of the music in the liner notes that presented a new view from a woman's perspective. A musical legend not to leave out is drummer and vocalist Karen Carpenter of the group The Carpenters. Karen is described by Modern Drummer on The Carpenters' first album, Ticket to Ride, as a drummer in full command of her technique, assured and full of fire, playing imaginative fills and great hand-foot combinations. The Carpenters earned huge success, and gradually Karen was pulled away from the kit to take center stage as the lead singer with the occasional feature on percussion. Karen's first love was drumming, and she was arguing that there's already enough chick singers and that she could best demonstrate her skills behind the drum kit. Karen's mindset and her ability on the drums raised the bar for female drummers, and the whole decade brought new genres, new sounds, and new female role models. Heading into the 1980s, 90s, we see the launch of MTV, and the drum machine changed the way we experience music forever. We see styles like synth pop, new wave, hip hop, and metal absolutely explode, and we see some serious female session musicians. More on that in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear your comments, so please drop a comment below, and also don't forget to like and subscribe and check out the previous episodes if you haven't already done so. I'll see you next time.